The room felt cold, even though the candles created tiny dots of heat. Albert Beaumont lay on the hardwood floor holding his head. "Are you all right, Albert?" De Villa knelt over him and asked. Albert shook his head. A trickle of blood oozed from the side of his mouth. He coughed, spraying pink. "What? What happened?" De Villa helped Albert into a sitting position. "You were... I'm not sure how to say it. You were possessed. That thing you summoned covered you. Its head became your head. Its body became your body." His eyes were glazed, unfocused. "What's that smell?" Albert sniffed the air. "Snake spit, I think. Jesus, I can't put it into words. It was horrible. The most horrible thing I've ever seen." Albert's head rolled. De Villa touched his brow and found it burning. "You saw it?" "Saw it. Jesus, yes. It hovered in the air for a minute. I can't describe it. It was horrible. Then it came down over you and it became you. Albert, I'm scared. That thing was evil. You shouldn't be fooling around with something like that. I could sense the power of it. God, it was like a bad dream." She looked into his glassy, frightened eyes and put her hand on his shoulder. "Never again, okay? Never again." Albert coughed again, shook his head, took a few deep breaths and said, "It took over my body." De Villa nodded vigorously. "It licked me with its disgusting, slimy tongue. I thought it was going to kill me." "Were you aware of anything?" "I didn't feel a thing, physically, except a shock when it came in and went out. Mentally, though, I feel like I've been raped. I sensed it taking over my body. It shared its mind with me. I could feel it in there like a goddamn parasite. Jesus, it was unbelievable. I wasn't in control of me anymore, it was. I was powerless inside my own body." He looked at her again, and his face clouded over. The wrinkles on his brow were as deep and crooked as cracks in a sidewalk. "I shared my brain with it," he said with a shudder, "and I could read its thoughts for a split second before it stopped me. I got the feeling that it didn't want me to see inside there. Once it knew I was able to read its consciousness, it closed that part of my brain off like a light switch. But in that one split second, Jesus Christ, it revealed a lot to me." De Villa smoothed his hair, brushing it off his face, mothering him. "Like what?" Albert struggled to one knee and felt his head. The rubbery feeling and dizziness that had overwhelmed him earlier had begun to subside. He could almost stand. "Help me up," he said in a whispery, shaken voice. De Villa supported his arm as he worked his way to his feet and stood unsteadily. His mind still reeled at the invasion. Everything hurt. Every muscle in his body had been tensed when that thing was in charge. Adrenaline had been pumping at an unbelievable rate. But, as spent as his body was, it was the mental strain that hurt the most. Albert could not stop thinking, reliving that awful moment when his mind and the consciousness of the demon were joined. He shivered involuntarily. During that moment of possession, when the thing entered him and gave him its brief glimpse of hell, Albert knew he had made a grave mistake. In the inky blackness that overwhelmed Albert, the background against which the thing emerged, he could sense that the demon knew exactly where it was. It knew that it was no longer deep in the jungle, among ignorant, savage people. It knew that it had materialized in a modern city, teeming with sophisticated beings, electric with possibilities. It knew it finally had a host it could use to its advantage. And it was happy. It was ecstatic. Albert could also feel the malice in its cold heart. He could sense it measuring him and gauging the new world into which it had been, with Albert's help, admitted. He could feel the pressing darkness, the timeless void from which it came, and knew in a heartbeat that it was ancient beyond man's understanding. It had been pent up, controlled and frustrated for too long. Now, excited at the prospect of freedom, of seeking destiny and power in this bold new century, it rejoiced. Albert saw the evil of its desires and knew that misery and submission awaited him and his daughter as long as they were forced to serve this cruel master. For mankind, worse, what Albert had glimpsed, ever so briefly, was hell. Not the understandable, classical hell of Dante, no. This was a new hell, built on true suffering and real destruction. It was the end of nature, the rise of death and chaos, the submission of man as a race. In Albert, it had learned everything about our culture. It had seen man's inhumanity to man, man's own damnation, weakness, and greed. In that instantaneous linking of their minds, it sucked every bit of knowledge in Albert's memory. So it knew exactly how to exploit all these things. The serpent demon had been unchanged for thousands of years. It waited and watched, as patient as the stars, while man, for all his technology and ideology, was the same slimy rock crawler he had always been. Thousands of years were just a blink. The species never changed. That pleased the demon. Albert knew that, because of him, the end was near. The fate of humanity had just slipped through his fingers. In that moment, the last few tenuous strands of Albert's sanity snapped. At Landis Woodley's mansion, the light slanted through the kitchen as the sun's angle shifted. It cut interesting shafts through the smoke from Buzzy's cigarette. "The movie's got to have a point," protested Neil. He'd been hunched over the typewriter, with his arms folded over the roller, his head down. Now he raised it, the indentations of the keys on his forehead. "No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to have anything," Landis snapped back. "Think about it. The point is, it has no point." Neil rubbed his face. Today he was dressed in a simple black dress. "Oh shit, Landis. Speak English. Our only job is to shock the moviegoer. That's it. Just shock his ass. My philosophy of shock is that it's got to be unexpected, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to have a rhyme or reason. It just happens. The more unexpected it is, the higher they jump." He leaned back, smiled, and pointed his finger at the ceiling, holding it up as if to say, "Number one." It gathered the attentions of Buzzy and Neil effectively, and they stared at him, listening hard. "Shock is the total reversal of polarity in a situation," he said. Buzzy shook his head. "Christ, you're getting kind of deep for me, Woody. What's all this shit about reversal of polarity?" Neil swept the hair back from his face, revealing the drying, chalky layer of thick makeup that he constantly applied to hide his whiskers. As a writer, he knew what Landis was driving at, but he was genuinely surprised at the man's artistic approach to this particular project. Landis intended for Cadaver to be his masterpiece. Usually it was wham bam. "Thank you, ma'am." Neil always kept a paperback dictionary in his pocketbook for situations just like this. Whipping it out, he quickly flipped to the S's and found the appropriate definition for shock. The dictionary says, "to strike with surprise, terror, horror, or disgust." Landis slapped the table, causing the coffee to jump and splatter. "That's us. We're shockers." Buzzy yawned. "So what's that got to do with us?" he asked. "Everything," Landis replied. "Every goddamn thing." "That's exactly the way I feel about horror movies." "Huh?" Buzzy squinted through his black eye. "What's the reason for the cadavers coming to life? Is it evil scientific experiments, black magic, voodoo, atomic radiation? No, there is no explanation. That's the beauty of it. It just happens. Who cares why? The important thing is that the cadavers start moving. There is no explanation. When they start killing people, it really doesn't matter how it got started, does it? No. It's happening. That's all you need to know. It's better not to explain. Let the people draw their own conclusions. All I'm concerned with is the action, not the explanation. The truth is, there is no answer to the mystery of why the cadavers come to life, because life has no answers. Buzzy rolled his eyes. Neil clapped his hands together and shouted, "My God, the man's an existentialist." "Right," Landis barked, "a horror existentialist." Landis beamed at them, and the entire kitchen radiated his infectious enthusiasm. For each of them, there was nothing better than making horror movies. "Neil," Landis said, "I want you to get started right away on the rewrite. Make any necessary adjustments in the plot to support our new attitude. Make it work, baby. Make it fucking sing." "What about an ending?" Neil asked. Landis smiled. Leaning back in his chair, he said, "Don't need one. There is no ending. The cadavers win. No explanation, no nothing. They win, period." "Bleak, fatalistic," Neil droned, "horror show noir." "Uh-huh," Landis concluded. "Just like life, the only ones who win are dead." The first satanic church was dark, its doors locked. Elsewhere in the house, Albert and Devila sat on a couch drinking more brandy. The sun was up now, casting its full spectrum of light upon the magic of night, killing it effectively for another 12 hours. The brandy warmed their throats and tranquilized their racing hearts. Albert wondered how he could undo the horror he had unleashed. He hated himself for performing the ceremony without proper preparation. Drunk, horny and boastful, he'd let himself be seduced by the idea that he could control it. The demon didn't take the cat. Why would it when it could have me? How many more times can I do that before the damn thing breaks free? Then he remembered why the village priest killed the host after the ceremony, to prevent its return to the same body. Certainly he did not want to act as the host again. That had been the most painful and terrifying experience of his life. He had been naive and foolish to conjure the serpent. Again he cursed his brandy-swollen male ego and its sophomoric attempt to impress Devila. It was just the kind of ignorant mistake he hated in others. A misguided, boastful bit of idiocy that could have cost him everything. God, he hated himself. Far from being some kind of theological doctrine, some intellectual argument, this foul demon was the very soul of evil. It meant to destroy or subjugate not only Albert and his daughter, but the rest of the world as well. Albert's plan had been foolhardy and based on nothing but greed. Now the force of evil would use Albert to return from a prison millennia old. Albert knew what the demon wanted. After all, it had been inside him. A question nagged Albert. Was this demon really Satan, or was the universe full of such creatures? Once the door between the two worlds opened, what else would come slithering through? Albert had been worshipping Lucifer all his adult life, but he had never equated it with just pure evil. In fact, to Albert, the argument was that there was really no such thing as good and evil. Do what thou wilt shall be the extent of the law. There was only life and death. It was what it was. The Prince of Darkness exists, he thought. It's here in this very house, and it means to destroy me and the people I love. Devila watched Albert. He was as pale as a sheet, shaking and wild-eyed. He didn't look like a man who had just pulled off the hoax of the year. Then maybe it was all real. Her mind raced. My God, she thought, if demons exist and mankind can summon them, what the hell else is out there? Albert had the power in those tuning forks. Devila found herself scanning the room constantly, afraid that the thing might come back. The forks are still in the other room, the church, he called it. God, that's frightening. That place is about as far from a church as you could get. Yet it was a place of worship. Albert Beaumont worshipped the wrong things, she decided. He was one sick puppy. Her eyes went back to the mirror again, locking on her face. And you're a sick puppy for even being here with him. This man's religion is evil. Deviler's was a much more practical theology. She worshipped money. She knew that if she could get her hands on those tuning forks, even for just an hour, she would be richer than her wildest dreams. And famous. She wanted to ask Albert, but he spoke first. "I've got to destroy those forks," he said in a trembling voice. 11 Deviler's Spanish-style, white stucco apartment building was in the slums of Beverly Hills. The same 3-block section of 4 to 6 unit buildings would have been an upper-middle-class paradise in any other neighborhood. But in Beverly Hills it was the low-rent district. It occupied a small 10-block strip of land just below Wilshire Boulevard, still technically Beverly Hills, but in name only. People there enjoyed the prestigious postmark, but none of the status of the exclusive neighborhood where the movie stars lived. Deviler liked her 1-bedroom apartment. It was cozy, cute in a California way. There were colorful Mexican tiles in the kitchen and bathroom, and a nice picture window that looked out onto the quiet street. A palm tree grew in the front yard. She had her own parking place. Tonight she couldn't sleep. The shock of what she had experienced at Albert's house had begun to wear off, replaced now by a numbness, a disbelief that made her relive it over and over again in her mind. The tongue of the serpent touched her 1,000 times in her dreams, haunting her relentlessly until she was forced to believe. But Deviler was a practical woman. She had fought her way up the ladder of success in one of the toughest, most competitive markets in the world. What she had seen shook her faith to the core. Like most people in LA, she had come from someplace else. Raised a Baptist, she had enough fire and brimstone in her to fear both death and life. She acted in high school plays, won a couple of beauty contests, and bought her bus ticket to Hollywood with money she made waiting tables in a skimpy outfit. She spent the next few years getting the runaround from agents, producers, and other, less interesting hustlers. She grew up fast, got tougher every day, and eventually decided that whatever she wound up doing in Hollywood, she would have to make the position herself. She began to live life on her own terms. She lay in her bed, staring at a movie poster for Daughter of Dracula, and remembered how she got the idea for her character. She heard that the job of Creature Features host had opened at a local TV station. She made a costume that showed off her figure, dyed her brown hair black, and auditioned. 2 weeks later, the young program director, who couldn't take his eyes off her cleavage, called to give her the job. "I am the mistress of my own destiny," she thought. But how far could she take the Deviler character? It had gone just about as far as it could in the local TV market. It was time to branch out. She was sick of showing the same stupid Grade Z movies every week, pandering to a bunch of adolescents and beatniks, and having to act the role of bimbo. It was time to move ahead. Into the movies. Fuck this crummy job. Fuck this lame TV station. Fuck the ignorant fans. I want more, so I'll have to go out and make more. As she lay gazing at the Daughter of Dracula poster, Deviler knew what her next step would be. Albert Beaumont sweated. The moist sheet stuck to his body like molting skin. His nightmares scorched the inside of his head, making him wish he were anything but asleep. He was in the dark, but it was a darkness he could feel and smell. A musty odor seemed to curl off him, making his head swim and his eyes water. He writhed in the sticky void, slithering back and forth across the uneven floor of his lair. He was not alone. With him were hundreds of other, lesser entities. They squirmed against him, pushing their snouts into his flesh, burrowing, searching. For what? The sensation was appalling. The things, whatever they were, clung to him desperately. Then a layer of understanding was peeled back, and he knew the terrible truth. He was their mother. They were his hatchlings. Then another layer drew back, and Albert screamed. They were snakes. Albert screamed again, but could not hear himself. He could feel his throat constrict, sense the air being pushed past his vocal cords, and he had no vocal cords. More layers peeled back. Albert was a snake himself. He writhed and curled, flexing his serpent body in a hopeless attempt to escape. The skin around his head split. It separated and cracked away from his eyes, revealing a fresh, wet, new layer beneath. The new layer felt the cold. The old layer stretched taut, pulling beyond its limits, peeling away. The feeling was indescribable. Albert shuddered. He bucked and convulsed, disgusted with the sensation. The old skin repulsed him, a coat of dead flesh, as crawling and rotten as roadkill. He struggled anew, frantic to remove the itchy cocoon that enveloped him. The new skin, as soon as it was exposed, felt radiant and alive. It breathed through open, robust pores, filling his body with energy. Albert twisted and turned. He flexed and rubbed against the hatchlings. The old skin peeled back, halfway now. The hatchlings squirmed more violently, and he could feel great rips of skin come off. They began to feast on the dead skin, nibbling at it with their hungry mouths. Their forked tongues licked and tickled against the dead shell, pulling at it. Then they began to tear it away more quickly. They were anxious. They knew that the doorway to Albert's world was open. When he realized what he was and what he was doing, he screamed again. Only this time he could hear it. He could hear it growing like a deafening siren, bouncing off the walls and echoing through the night. Then a hand touched him. He jumped. His eyes jerked open, and he looked into Thora's face with wide, terrified eyes. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up!" He kept screaming until the last shards of nightmare melted from his consciousness. He was aware of the wetness of the sheets, how they clung to him, how he'd pulled them back, but in so doing only tangled himself farther. Thora unwrapped him gently, watching in horror as her father's body quivered spasmodically beneath her fingers. The terror he felt was so intense that it had raised welts across his back and shoulders. The panic in his eyes when she switched on the lights caused her to step back. That panic burned into her memory. Landis Woodley's office was in the kitchen. At one time he had a proper office on Sunset Strip, but soon found out that most of his business got done in the bar. The cost of maintaining an office was bleeding him dry. The receptionist, the furniture, the framed movie posters, it was all a colossal waste of time. Trying to play with the big boys was not working. When you played in their ballpark, you had to be able to swing with the checkbook in a way that made Landis nervous. He started cutting costs after the first month. The receptionist went first, then the fancy furniture, and in less than a year he was down to one phone, a card table, and some folding chairs. The next logical step was to work out of his house. The commute was only 20 feet, and the price was right. Now he actually enjoyed working at home, and he was absolutely convinced that he got more things done. Landis made a mental note to have someone clean up the place. Cartons of Chinese food and empty pizza boxes littered the counter. Dirty dishes filled the sink. The phone rang next to the coffee pot. He moved some cups and a newspaper out of the way and picked it up. "Hello? Mr. Woodley, this is Devila," a throaty female voice said. Landis smiled. Devila was one of his favorite people. "Devila, darling, how did you like the party?" "It was wonderful. You did an unbelievable job. People are still talking about the guillotine bit. Thanks, nice to hear that. So what's on your mind? Well, I don't know how to say this, but I've got something I want to discuss with you. A movie project. I'm always up for a film project, he said, except that right now I'm going into production on Cadaver in a few days, and I'm afraid I'll be busy for a while. Davila's voice softened. Could we get together this afternoon? I'm pretty busy, Landis said truthfully. It'll only take a few minutes, she cooed. This is something big, huge. I can't talk about it over the phone. All I can tell you is, this is the most incredible thing you've ever seen. If you can get it on film, you'll be a legend. Landis pondered the offer. It sounds interesting. You can't tell me anything more. Not over the phone. I see. Well, Devila, I really would love to work with you, but I'm swamped right now. Mr. Woodley, Devila said, call me Landis. Okay, Landis, this is really big. I've seen something truly incredible, something that defies logic, a supernatural entity. It's real, and it's scary as hell. I've seen it with my own eyes. Are you interested? Landis coughed. Well, I can't really get into anything right now. How about if I make it worth your while? I can be very persuasive. Davila's voice had changed. It was softer, sexier. That's all Landis needed to hear. He smiled at the phone and said, Okay, how about we meet at Barney's at, say, 2? Davila's voice toughened slightly. I'll be there, but please come alone, she said. Her vocal range was amazing, and Landis had always wanted to use her in a movie. She was a natural and already famous, at least in L.A. Barney's alone, he repeated. Good, I'm looking forward to this, she said. See you there. Barney's was dark as usual. Davila was not in her costume, but she still drew stares from the handful of men at the bar. Without the witchy makeup, Davila was a very attractive woman. She found Landis at a booth in the back. I've never seen you out of character, Landis said with a smile. You look great. Davila returned his smile with one of her own. She sat across from him and ordered a glass of white wine. They made flirtatious small talk until her wine arrived. Then she got down to business. I've seen something. She cryptically repeated her earlier claim. Landis looked into her eyes and waited for her to complete the thought. When she didn't, he asked the obvious question. Okay, I'll bite. What did you see? Davila leaned forward. Landis could smell the sweet wine on her breath. It mingled with the French perfume she favored, applied liberally. This has to remain between us, not to leave this table, she said. Landis inhaled her scent. Are you swearing me to secrecy? Davila nodded. No bullshit now. I'm serious. What I am about to tell you must never leave this table. Agreed? Agreed, Landis answered, his curiosity aroused. Davila's voice dropped. I've seen something amazing, something that scared the shit out of me. The thing was, it was real. At least as far as I know, it was real. I checked. It would have been a bitch to fake. Landis sipped his beer. So what did you see? I can't tell you any details, she said, so don't ask. But to make a long story short, I've managed to get my hands on something truly supernatural. Landis chuckled and shook his head. Davila looked surprised. I thought you were into the occult. Landis shook his head. Just because I make horror movies doesn't mean I'm into every cockamamie, hocus-pocus load of shit people try to sell me. I'm a realist. I'm into money. Good, then we understand each other, she said. Landis narrowed his eyes, letting his voice fall an octave. Let me get something straight right now. You don't believe in this shit, do you? You mean the supernatural? She asked, wine glass in hand. Landis smiled as his head bobbed slowly up and down. Yeah, right, the supernatural, the occult, whatever you want to call it. What do you take me for, an idiot? I don't believe in anything, but just hear me out. It makes what I have to tell you all the more incredible. Landis signaled for another round of drinks. Davila began her story. I saw a real demon, she finally said. It materialized out of thin air. Landis smiled. What have you been smoking? Davila's face changed. Her mouth bent downward at the corners, and she pushed away from the table. Don't mock me. I don't have to take this shit. Okay, relax. It's just that, well, it's hard to believe, you know? I know it is. I know you must think I'm crazy, but I swear it's true. You say you actually saw this thing, and you want me to film it? She nodded. What's it look like? Davila looked around the room. She leaned forward and whispered, It looks like a giant snake. A giant snake? He whispered back. A serpent, a demon serpent. Landis looked into her eyes, searching for signs that she was lying or crazy, and found none. Davila lit a cigarette in a long silver holder and blew smoke across the table. She believes what she's saying, he thought. She believes it 100%. Landis decided to be diplomatic and humor her for the time being. You know, I've always said that if anyone brought me a genuine ghost, a haunted house, a flying saucer, whatever, and I could film it and verify it, that film would be worth $1 million. Now you tell me that you can produce this phenomenon for my cameras. Davila nodded. Guaranteed. What do you want out of it? Landis asked. I want you to make a movie about it, starring me, she said firmly. Landis's face remained immobile. He had a great poker face when he wanted to use it. I see, he said. Documentary or drama? I don't care, she answered. As long as I'm the star and I get a share of the profits, a big share. How much? 60-40 split. I get the 60, you get the 40. Landis laughed. I don't make deals like that. If I did, I would have gone out of business a long time ago. Davila was not laughing. Her eyes bore down on him like bad weather. Take it or leave it, she said coolly. He wondered if she was serious. It's too far out, he thought. A demon? Nah, I'd be a sucker to believe that. I think I'll leave it, he said. Suit yourself. I'll go to National with it. I'm sure somebody there will listen. She started to rise and swilled down the last of her wine. Thanks for seeing me. Too bad we couldn't do business. She stepped away from the table. The men at the bar watched to see what she would do. As she took her first few paces toward the door, Landis stood and went after her. The men craned their necks to follow the action. Landis grabbed her arm. Hold it, he said. Let's talk about this a minute. Davila gave him a look of utter determination, saying in a glance that she was not to be trifled with. She let him gently lead her back to the table. Do you realize that I don't even know your real name? He asked in a friendly voice, one as non-threatening as he could muster. I know that, she replied. No one knows my real name. I don't give it out. If you want to do business with me, I'll have to know. It shows trust, good faith, he said. Davila snapped a smile at him, just a short, unfriendly baring of teeth, but it made him relax. Trust? I don't trust anybody, she said. You're going to have to trust me, he said, his voice thick and sweet. Why? Because I think you might have something here. I don't know why, but I don't think you're lying about this. It's completely insane, but that's what I like about it. It might be worth a chance anyway. Now it was Davila's turn to be smug. She looked over at the bar. The men who had been staring at her all looked away quickly. She looked back at Landis. My name is Julie. Julie what? Julie Greenlee, she replied. Come on, Julie Greenlee, let's go over to my office and talk about this some more. Thora Boehmd cared for her father, wiping his fevered brow and spoon-feeding him chicken broth. She'd called Dr. Segwick, but he'd not been able to find anything physically wrong with Albert. Dr. Segwick suggested she consult a psychiatrist. He suggested that whatever was wrong with her father was born of mental problems. Many of the people who had contact with the Beaumont family held the opinion that Albert Beaumont was quite insane and had been since the death of his beloved wife. Albert had turned to the occult in his grief, they opined. In a vain attempt to reach out to her from the grave, Albert had dabbled in many of the darker, esoteric arts. His Catholic upbringing laid the groundwork for his beliefs, giving him delusions of heaven and hell, Satan, and other diabolical beguilements. Dr. Segwick believed Albert mad. Apart from sedating Albert and prescribing rest, there was little else he could do. Your father is a very disturbed man, he told Thora in the hall. He needs help that I can't give him, professional help. Is my father insane? She asked. He's suffering from some form of mental collapse. I don't know enough about such matters to give you an opinion. That question is best answered by a trained analyst. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a card, which he handed to Thora. This is a colleague of mine, Dr. Winnett. He's a top man in his field. If anyone can help, he can. Call him, Thora. Call him first thing tomorrow. She looked at the card and then at Segwick's aged, responsible face. Her unblinking eyes registered, but failed to reflect, all the numbing information she'd had to absorb. Yes, I'll call. Dr. Segwick left. His heavy footsteps receded from the house, across the wooden porch and beyond. Thora was left staring out through the screen at him. She wondered what to do. Thora stayed up with her father, wiping the sweat from his face, assuring him that there was no demon in the room with them, and trying to calm him down. It was the longest night of her life. When the moon rose outside his window, her father howled. 12. The morgue was a wonderful place. Buzzy and Landis loved it from the first moment they walked in. Isn't this cool? Buzzy whispered to Landis as the coroner led them through the rooms. It's perfect, absolutely perfect, Landis whispered back. I love it. Look at those metal tables and the walls. Jesus, look at the white tile walls. It's like a fucking slaughterhouse. I couldn't have designed a better set. At last, Dr. MOAN paused and turned to face them. He had a sly smile on his face that Landis found difficult to read. Would you like to see some of our customers? Buzzy and Landis exchanged looks. Customers? Yeah, Landis answered. Why not? You have a strong stomach? The doctor asked. I guess so, Landis replied. How about you, Mr. Haller? I can handle it, he said without hesitation. Okay, follow me. Dr. MOAN, the aging coroner for L.A. County, led them into the abattoir. It was cold, and the smell was extraordinary, a weird combination of death and Lysol. He walked up to one of the drawers that were built into the wall, pressed a release on the handle, and slid it open. The stench was horrible, like bad meat, and Landis fought his gag reflex. The faint scent of the deodorizing agent, which Landis now noticed was coming from the air vents, did little to offset the pungent smell of the corpse. Their hot breath in the chilly room made fog clouds that hung for a moment before dissipating. In that moment, Landis was reminded that the tiny clouds were a sign of life, and that no such mist issued from the customers here. The stainless steel drawer slid out noiselessly. It was well made and terribly efficient. Landis noticed the intense look on Buzzy's face. His keen interest in the business of dead bodies was beyond what he needed to research the movie. That thought gave Landis pause. A chill shivered through him. The body bag was dark brown and zippered. The coroner gave them a last glance and pulled it down. The whine of the zipper cut the frigid air like a dentist's drill. "Here's one of our recent patients." "Patients," Landis said. "That's Fanny," he thought. "As you can see, this man was the victim of a rather nasty automobile accident. I haven't examined him yet, but I suspect that he died from that massive head trauma." He pointed to the side of the man's skull. It was caved in, as if somebody had smashed him with a baseball bat. Just above the left eye, was an indentation the size of a grapefruit. White bone peeked through the mass of blood and grey matter. His eyes were open. Landis saw that they looked dry and flat. A slight dry film had formed over them, and they stared up at the ceiling blankly. Nobody said anything. They just stared at the corpse for a few minutes. Then the coroner zipped the bag back up and slid it into the wall. "You know, I did some acting back in high school," the coroner said. The fact that they were in the presence of death many times over did nothing to lessen this man's dedication to the theatrical arts. The possibility of being in a movie had so titillated him that he spoke of nothing else from that point on. "I could see that from the self-assured manner in which you carried yourself," said Landis in a parody of thespian diplomacy. Buzzy raised an eyebrow. He was interested to see how Landis would handle the coroner's dreams of stardom. "I would like to hear you read, if you don't mind," Landis said, feigning interest. Of course," came the reply. Landis walked out of the room, leaving Buzzy and the coroner alone. The doctor looked at Buzzy and smiled uncomfortably. "This place is neat," Buzzy said. "I really liked that dead body you showed us." The coroner nodded, glanced at the door through which Landis had disappeared, and coughed. Realizing that Landis would not return immediately, he decided to engage in conversation with Buzzy. "What do you do?" he asked. "I make monsters." Buzzy grinned. The coroner attempted another smile, this one even weaker than the last. "Oh, I see." "For the movies," Buzzy added. "I do the special effects." "Oh," the coroner exclaimed, finally understanding. "You didn't think I made real monsters, did you?" "Of course not," he replied nervously. "Where did Mr. Woodley go?" Buzzy shrugged. "He goes wherever he wants." The room was still. "Could I see another body?" Buzzy asked, his eyes twinkling like fireflies. The coroner gave Buzzy a look of consternation, part irritation, part curiosity. Showing them the first body had been a scare tactic, designed to impress the filmmakers. It was something that the coroner did with visitors, a little reminder that they were in his world, the world of corpses. Now the monster maker wanted to see more. It was not normal. "There's a girl. She just came in this morning. Nice looking too." Buzzy began to nod vigorously. "Well, since you're with the movie and all, I suppose it wouldn't hurt. It ain't like she's gonna complain." They both laughed nervously. The cold air bristled with electricity, Buzzy obviously as excited as Dr. MOAN. The coroner looked around and said, "She's in 22. Come on, I'll let you have a little peek." They walked toward the locker, 10 strides from where they were, and Muna put his hand on the handle. "I should tell you, sometimes we get some interesting cases. Young girls, murder victims usually, their bodies are in real good shape. We get a lot of prostitutes here." He twisted the handle and jerked the drawer open. "This one's in excellent condition, no outward signs of trauma." He let the drawer slide almost into Buzzy's groin. In a peculiar motion, he flipped the sheet down, revealing her naked body. "No bag?" Buzzy asked. The coroner looked up. "She's fresh, just came in." "We don't bag 'em till they're ripe." Buzzy whistled. "Geez, she's like, I don't know, like dead." "Yes," the doctor sighed. So young and beautiful too. Cause of death? I'll find out soon. I can tell you from experience, they can't hide from me. I see it all, inside and out. He paused and looked into Buzzy's eyes, if you know what I mean. Buzzy swallowed, his throat dry. Yeah, he whispered. I can only imagine. It must be pretty intense. It is, MOAN agreed. This one's, I don't know, kind of nice, actually. Yeah, she's real nice, Buzzy replied. Better than that other guy we saw. Shit, if I had my choice of which one I had to work on, well, no contest. MOAN smiled. That's why I love being the boss. They turned back to the girl, her pale skin nearly the same color as the sheet. Nice figure, too, MOAN whispered. Too bad she's dead. Buzzy's hand reached out toward the girl's naked torso, hovering inches above her chest. May I? He asked. MOAN nodded, admiring the man's nerve. He understood the compulsion. Buzzy lightly touched her breast. The cold, dead skin excited him. The doctor was about to comment when Landis re-entered the room carrying a script. He handed it to a surprised Dr. MOAN. Here, read this for me, he said loudly, slightly out of breath. It's the role of the coroner. I thought you might be perfect for it. The coroner smiled. He scanned the pages while Landis and Buzzy lit cigarettes. 15 minutes later, they had Dr. MOAN out in the parking lot fighting off imaginary zombies. Landis pronounced him a great actor and promised him the role of the coroner in Cadaver after 5 minutes of emoting under the hot California sun. People really would do anything for a chance to act in a movie, even a Landis Woodley production. Landis and Buzzy drove away laughing, convinced that the location alone was going to make Cadaver a hit. Landis was having a cast meeting at his house, and it was his experience that Jonathan Luboff should be picked up several hours before and watched like a hawk to avoid any unpleasant drug situations. That job was Landis's alone. He trusted no one. He drove to Luboff's apartment, successfully surprising the old man before he'd had a chance to have his afternoon fix. Albert Beaumont's mental condition continued to deteriorate, manifesting itself with worsening hallucinations. He woke up screaming hourly, giving Thora nightmares of her own. The demon talked to Albert in his dreams. I'm coming, it said. I am coming to destroy your world. But why? Albert pleaded. I have worshipped you. I have glorified your name, Lucifer. The snake hissed. The forked tongue flickered. Because I can, you puny, idiotic fool. Albert watched the reptile head twist and rotate unnaturally on its human body. The shocking metamorphosis of man to serpent jarred Albert's fragile senses every time he focused on it. The only adjective that could possibly describe it was ungodly. The snake-headed abomination pointed at him. Man is done, it spit. To destroy him is to destroy the work of God, which gives me great pleasure. I will use you, little man. I have waited for you all these centuries. Now, at last, you have released me to my destiny. God exists? Albert asked. The snake head pivoted, its terrible, lidless eyes moving coldly in the oversized sockets. It took in the room constantly, always aware of change or movement. You are more of a fool than I thought, it said. Albert strained at the confines of his dreams like a man tied to a rack. Good and evil were abstract ideas that man had created to explain his own compulsions. Weren't they? Wasn't that the whole point? Do what thou wilt shall be the extent of the law. Was the black widow spider evil for devouring her mate? Albert's whole world had been based on the answer to that question's being no. Evil is everywhere, said the snake. Nature is full of evil. Thora entered the room. Even though Albert was deep in his drug-induced sleep, he was aware of her. So was the demon. It let a series of thoughts, too horrible for Albert to comprehend fully, pass into his mind. Albert shuddered, revulsion leaving a taste of bile in his mouth. He realized that since his possession, he was linked psychically with the demonic entity. The door between the two worlds somehow passed through him. He realized with cold certainty that the demon wanted Thora's young female body. It was only a matter of time before it possessed her as it did him. The afternoon was fading into evening. Thora, about to leave for her night class, checked on her father, who seemed to be sleeping quietly. She slipped back out of the room and descended the stairs. The house was still. A clock ticked in the hall, creating a melancholy ambience. The door to her father's studio was locked. She couldn't seriously bring herself to call it a church. She knew he was the head of an esoteric cult that practiced odd and primitive rituals. But what he did wasn't evil. His satanic practices were merely an attempt to gain insight into non-Christian theologies. Thora was in the act of opening the front door when she was startled by a figure standing on her porch. "Oh, you scared me," she said. "I came to see if your father was all right," said Devila. Devila was not dressed in her costume. She wore a simple dark skirt and blouse. Even without her makeup, Devila's distinctive face was easily recognizable by the college student. Thora looked down, her posture changed, and from the shift in her body language, it was clear that Albert Beaumont was far from all right. "He's sleeping," Thora said, faltering. "Oh, I thought maybe I'd visit him." "Well, I'm about to go to school, but I'm sure he'd love to see you when he wakes up. Would you like to come in and wait?" Devila smiled, appearing embarrassed at Thora's childlike trust in a woman she barely knew. "I don't know." Thora took her arm and gently pulled her through the door. "Don't be silly. Please come in. I think you might be able to cheer him up or something. I'm really worried about him. I mean, really, really worried. I've never seen him like this. The doctor says he's having a nervous breakdown, but that can't be true, can it? My father is one of the strongest men in the world." Devila glanced up the stairs in the direction of Albert's room. "I don't know," she stammered again. "He's a brilliant man. Nothing ever bothers him. This just doesn't make any sense." Thora's tiny voice quivered as she went about her act of trying to convince herself that nothing was wrong. "You know what I think?" Devila shook her head. "I think he got something down there in South America. I think he contracted some virus or other, and it's affecting his brain." "That's possible," Devila replied. "Won't you stay and wait for him to wake up? I hate to leave him alone, and I know he'd like to see you. It would mean a lot. Please." "I don't know. It's not right to be here when you're not, and he's sleeping." Thora held up her books. "Look, it's getting late, and I have to go. Please stay. There's stuff to eat and drink in the refrigerator. I'll be back in 3 hours. Dad's up in his room." "Why don't you go on up?" Devila smiled. "If you insist, but I feel weird." "Don't. Stay a while, please. I know he would want that." Thora checked her watch and sighed. "I gotta go." She walked out the door before Devila could respond. Devila stood in the living room, her heart beating rapidly, listening to the house. She looked at the arch-topped, medieval-style door to Albert's church, standing like a heavy wooden barricade between this world and the next. As if in a dream, she was across the room and had her hand on the wrought-iron lever before she realized what she was doing. Whatever force was driving her tried to unlatch it. Of course, it had to be locked, she thought. The tuning forks were probably still in there. Standing at the threshold for another few time-distorted moments, she thought about the man upstairs. What had happened to him? Was he truly insane now? It was easy for her to believe that, having seen Albert's possession by the snake demon. An experience like that would be more than enough to drive any man permanently mad. Certainly Albert was suffering. Davila hadn't actually planned on physically taking the tuning forks with her today. She'd wanted to just check out the situation. But now that the opportunity presented itself, it seemed like destiny. Even though she was terrified by the forks and didn't even want to touch them, she knew the value of the cursed things. Greed motivated her. She looked around the room and wondered where the key to the door was. Probably right here, she thought. Her eyes scanned the ornate molding around the door. Above was a small shelf, ideal for hiding the key, and she ran her hand across it until it stopped at a small protrusion. She pulled it down and looked at it. It was an old-style key, long and cylindrical. She weighed it in her sweaty hand, asking herself one last time if she had the stomach for what she planned. Then she fitted the key in the large hole and turned it. The click was loud and disconcerting. The door was heavy but swung cleanly. She entered the room cautiously. It was colder than it should have been, noticeably cooler than the rest of the house. She switched on the lights. The place seethed with the memory of the demon, and she prayed silently as she approached the altar. Something jumped across her path and startled her. She cried out. The huge black cat, Mephistopheles, hopped onto the altar and hissed. She tried to shoo it away, but the cat stood its ground. "I don't have time for this," she said. The cat hissed again. Davila looked around at the ritual objects strewn about the room. She picked up a wooden staff and waved it. "Get the fuck off that altar, or I'll knock you off, you stupid cat." The cat jumped away, back into the shadows. "That's a good kitty." Her hands were tight and stiff as she pulled away the tapestry that concealed the hiding place. It was a small compartment, hardly bigger than a bread box, built into the wall, without a locking door handle. Without thinking, she opened it and felt inside. The forks were there, wrapped in a towel, lying on their sides like pieces of pipe. She lifted them out carefully, closed the small door, and holding them away from her body, carried them out of the room. Her skin crawled and her heart pounded. The dryness in her mouth was affecting her breathing. She wheezed and tried to swallow, but only about half a lungful of musty air passed her constricted throat. She walked directly to the front door, then remembered that she had to reclose the door and return the lock to its original position. She turned back reluctantly. The forks were heavier than she'd imagined, substantial and hard beneath the white cotton towel. Even through the layers of cloth, she could feel the power of evil in them as they shifted in her grip. They were so heavy that she had to resort to cradling them against her body like a baby. The thought of them touching her in that maternal way made her nauseous. They radiated an almost imperceptible tingle, as if they were vibrating among themselves. It made uncomfortable the flesh of her arms, like a low-level electrical shock. She walked as quickly as she could, closed the door, replaced the key, and... A moan from above made her jump. It rose to a shriek and shocked a double shot of adrenaline through her veins. It pumped through her like amphetamine, instantly and without warning. She froze as the second shriek cut the air from the direction of the stairs. All the hair on her body bristled, and she felt a numbness in her legs. The adrenaline was now a metallic taste in her mouth. It's Albert, she thought. It's poor Albert up there losing his mind. And me with the tuning forks. Jesus Christ, what am I doing? It was the pain in Albert's voice that made her change her mind about running. It sounded so pathetic, so tortured. She hesitantly approached the steps and listened for signs of consciousness from his room. Taking a few steps up, she realized there was another sound coming from up there. A ragged, tortured breathing that was audible even above the pounding of her heart. "Leave. Get out now. Run. Don't look back." No. Devila still had an ounce of humanity left inside her. That and a jigger of curiosity. It sounded as if he was dying in there. She couldn't leave him just yet. I'll just peek in and call an ambulance, she thought, then get the hell out. It's the least I can do for him, poor soul. He needs some kind of help. She mounted the stairs and walked carefully to his door, the tuning fork still in her arms. As her line of vision swept into room, she saw the outline of his legs, still and tightly defined against the white cotton sheets. Her eyes travelled up his torso and saw that he appeared to be sitting up. She considered putting the forks down, but decided against it until she could ascertain whether he was asleep or not. It was hard enough picking those awful things up once. She might not be able to force her hands to do it a second time. If she needed to, she could always put them against the wall by the door, out of sight. Holding them back, away from him, she slid into the room sideways, her face first. "Albert?" she said softly. "Albert, are you awake?" Farther into the room now, and very tense, she came. She saw an arm move. Was he awake? "Albert?" Her voice came up in volume slightly. "Albert? Are you awake, dear?" She stepped around the corner of the door and looked directly at him. Her scream rang out through the empty house like the sound of breaking glass. Albert's head was gone. In its place was the snake's sinuous grey neck, tapered head, and blunt snout, from which the ropish tongue flicked. The demon's flat eyes followed her movement ominously. She stepped back, her mouth open, the sounds of shock coming from her throat. Her legs tangled up in themselves, and she stumbled backward. The neck snapped, and the jaws opened. It happened so fast that Devila didn't have time to react. A baseball-sized globule shot from the snake's mouth and whizzed by Devila's head. It landed with a splat on the wall behind her. What? There was a fleck of wetness on the back of her hand. "It's spitting at me. It's spitting, and it would have hit me if I hadn't stumbled just then." The thing was deadly accurate. A spitting viper. She fell into the hall and scrambled to her feet. Her hand was beginning to throb, and the thought occurred to her that the spittle was acid. A few seconds later it was burning like hell. She wiped it frantically on her shirt, but the tingling only worsened. She ran down the stairs, paying close attention to her feet so she wouldn't fall, and found the kitchen sink. The cold water helped a little, but she began to feel a numbness around the fiery spot on her hand. Then she couldn't feel the water. Ironically, she still cradled the tuning forks like a baby in her arms, even though her hand was throbbing. Tears erupted from her eyes and streamed down her face. She began to tremble. Was it the fear or the poison? God help me, she thought, the thing spit at me, and it's poison. If I hadn't stumbled, I'd be dead. Get out of the house now, she told herself. Get out and don't look back. 13. The rehearsals were excellent. Jonathan Luboff crawled out of his shell and delivered his usual professional character study. His eyes broadcast pain that was almost unbearable to watch. Landis knew that it was those eyes that would sell the role he was playing, so dark and strangely compelling. Tad Kingston gave Neil's inspired script a one-dimensional reading. He looked good in his makeup, hit all his marks, and kept his hair from upstaging him, a serviceable performance by Tad's standards. The interior shots, now being done at Landis's house, were easy to block, and Buzzy worked as they went along. He'd enlisted the aid of two of his beatnik friends to play cadavers, promising them both a screen credit and a few reefers. They agreed readily. It was a kick to dress up and scare people, they told him. "Tell me something I don't already know," he had said in reply. The day flew by. Landis directed the action, and everything seemed orderly and dignified. No wild party today. When Landis worked, he was a man possessed. There was too much work to do for anyone to be falling behind the pace. Landis planned on completing 20 to 30 shots a day, an unheard-of pace even among the B-movie miracle men. It allowed for precious few second takes, so Landis liked to have his actors well rehearsed and prepared to jump into any scene at any time. Landis let most mistakes go. He was too cheap to repair the damage. Why fix something that most people would miss anyway? Lubov's accent washed everything he said in a general European mishmash that most American teenagers just took as additional shtick. Horror movies didn't have to make sense, they just had to scare you. Jonathan Lubov was beyond caring. The demons inside him were all too real, the pain in his soul far deeper than mere acting. Jonathan shrugged it all off. He was emoting with his essence, portraying pure pain that transcended the role he played. His own life was a horror show. What was role-playing to others was truth to him. He was the reflection of his own misery. When it came time to deliver, Lubov was flawless. Under the watchful eye of Landis, he kept his drug use controlled and memorized his lines. A lifetime of experience carried him through difficult times that would have destroyed lesser men. Jonathan Lubov was made of steel in some regards. Landis marveled at his tenacity to keep working, to keep surviving personal travails, and bend but never break under the massive weight of his sorrow. Landis always hired the same cameraman. Chet Bronsky was another Woodley special, blackballed from the rest of the filmmaking community by his left-wing politics. He was a zealous socialist in an era where that sort of thing could ruin your career. Brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee, he told them all to go straight to hell. Consequently, he stopped being hired by every production unit in a Hollywood driven to extremes by paranoia. Landis Woodley liked Chet Bronsky and hired him to shoot all his films, although lately he talked him into working under an assumed name, Chet Lenz. Chet mapped out the camera angles and made notes on the lighting for each scene. Landis was over his shoulder every inch of the way, shouting and directing the movement of people and props. He smiled when, near the end of the afternoon, he realized that Cadaver was ready to shoot. What remained of Albert Beaumont stood on the stairs, looking down at the open door. De Villa had been here, he knew. Even though possessed at the time, he still retained the image of her through the serpent's eyes. He saw her screaming and watched her flee. He had no knowledge other than that. His legs were weak and his head throbbed. He could barely focus his eyes. Every time the serpent possessed him, it seemed to tense every muscle in his body to the point of snapping. Albert wept. He knew that the possession had taken place without the tuning forks this time. That meant that the demon had complete access to reach into him, and even more terrifying than that, it could come forward at any time. Albert's mind resisted the only thought, the only plan that made sense. He had to save Thora from this fate. He had to save the world. He staggered down the steps and across the living room. The tuning forks must be destroyed. When he found that they were missing, he became confused and even more afraid. Had the demon taken them? Had he, Albert, already hidden them and couldn't remember? Had Thora gotten rid of them? He ruled out the Thora possibility, realizing that she had no knowledge of them or their terrible power. Then he remembered. Devila. She could have taken them. She knew their power, and she knew where they were. The thought screamed through his brain like a rocket. No, not Devila. Albert pulled at his hair and paced the room frantically. He had to warn her, but the weight of derangement hung heavy across Albert's shoulders. He knew it was only a matter of time before the demon returned. He had to act now. He stumbled to the phone and dialed Devila's number. His hand shook so violently that it took several attempts before he was successful. It rang incessantly, and Albert banged the heavy black receiver against the table in frustration. When it became evident that Devila wasn't home, Albert staggered toward the door, consumed with thoughts of a final solution. He walked through the open portal into the dark, swirling air, intent on distancing himself as far from his home as possible. He walked through the streets, into the arid hills behind the houses, and disappeared into the scrub brush. Trudging along like a zombie, he tried to squeeze as much energy from his aching body before it came back and found him. It didn't matter where he wound up, just as long as it was far away from his house and Thora. Landis was ready to begin filming. The cameras were in position, the lights set, the sets arranged. His house had become a dream factory now. He sat in the living room before the massive fireplace and closed his eyes. Tomorrow at the crack of dawn it would begin. From all the disparate elements, Landis would form a cohesive piece. The idea he envisioned, the script he nurtured along with Neil, the actors he hired, the sets he improvised from his own furniture, the monster corpses that Buzzy fashioned, the morgue, the money for the film stock, it all waited to come together. And it would, under Landis Woodley's direction. Now, after all the planning, the moment of truth was at hand. He rubbed his eyes and yawned. He was alone in the great silent house. But that silence deceived, for in the darkened quiet of those rooms 1,000 fears scuttled. Landis Woodley was an insecure and lonely man. He dozed until the telephone rang. It jarred him back from the sweet release of his fatigue. "Hello?" A husky female voice said, "Landis, this is Devila. I have the objects." Landis shook off the layers of sluggishness that had draped his body while he slept. He looked at the clock. It was after 2. He'd been sleeping for hours. "Devila, it's a little late for this. I start shooting tomorrow at first light," he rasped. "I'm sorry, Landis," she said. "I hate to bother you, but this is really, really important. I got those objects I told you about. I can't keep them long. We need to film them right away." Landis sat forward and took a few deep breaths to bring the oxygen level in his blood back up to an alert status. "But listen to me. I know this is an inopportune time, and I apologize for that. But the situation presented itself to me today, and I seized it. Now I can't keep these objects. I can only have them for a short while. I could get into big trouble if I'm found out. Look, I know this is nuts, but we have to film this right now, tonight. Otherwise we lose out." Landis rolled his eyes. "Oh shit, Devila, I can't do it now. I got a million things to do. I'm trying to get some rest before—" "Then forget it," she snapped. "Hold on," he said, his throat scratched and dry. "Let me think about this." The lights were set and the cameras were loaded. If he wanted to do it, there would never be a better time. If he just wasn't so damn tired. Landis sighed, longing for a glass of water. He said, "You sound a little distraught. Are you all right?" "No, I'm not all right. I've just been through something that sacred the shit out of—" She paused, caught her breath, then evened her voice like a rope snapped taut and continued, "Why am I telling you this? I called you first because I thought you might be interested. Common courtesy. I can always go somewhere else with it." Landis heard the strain in her voice and knew instinctively that the woman was scared. He could smell fear like a wolf. "Okay, cool it. I got the message. Did you see the thing?" Devila sucked air between her teeth. "I don't want to talk about it now," she said, biting off her words. "It's got to be tonight?" "Yes." "Look, I can be there in 15 minutes, she said breathlessly. Landis heard a truck drive by in the background over the phone. It rumbled through the line with a blast of white noise, drowning out everything for a few seconds. "Where the hell are you?" he asked. "At a phone booth," she shouted over the roar of the truck. "I can't go home." Landis was about to ask why not when he thought better of it. He could read the situation from the information he'd already gleaned. She'd stolen the objects, and now she had to use them right away before she got caught. It didn't take a Rhodes Scholar to figure that one out. The more his mind cleared, the more he realized that he couldn't let this opportunity pass him by. If what she said was true, it could be a piece of film that might ultimately be worth more than the whole production of Cadaver. He wrestled with the decision. Davila waited. Landis heard another truck rumble by. "Okay," he said finally, "I have some cameras up here at the house. I guess I could do it. Are you sure we can't do this in a day or two?" "Absolutely not. It's now or never. Otherwise I go somewhere else with it," she said, her voice quivering. The road noises crept back as soon as she stopped talking. Her voice changed again, softening. "Landis? Yeah? I want you to do this. You're the only one who can do it justice." Chet Bronsky was asleep. He liked to get a good 10 hours in before he had to work, especially with Landis Woodley. Landis usually planned 20 to 30 shots a day. 20 to 30. Most feature-length movie productions thought anything over 3 shots a day was incredible. When the phone rang, he tried to ignore it. When it persisted, he picked it up. "Yeah?" he growled, his voice slurred and deep. "Chet? Who the fuck is this? I'm sleeping." "It's Landis." After a moment's hesitation, a cough and a few deep breaths, Chet responded. "What's the problem?" "Something's come up, something important." "Can you come over right away?" Chet coughed some more. "What the hell for?" "I'm sleeping. I got a big day tomorrow. You know that, for Christ's sake. Why are you bothering me?" "I need you to film something. It's a private affair, just you and me and a third party. Look, I know this is a pain in the ass, but I'll pay you." "How much?" It was the question of the day. "How about $100? I don't know." "Shit, I gotta get out of bed, drive across town. That's a lot of work." Landis said, $150. "I don't want to get up. Call someone else." $200. Chet sighed. He'd do it now, but he didn't want to. Money was money. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, he said. He slammed the phone down, swung his legs over the side of the bed, and sat up. Reaching for his pack of cigarettes by the side of the bed, he fished one out and lit it. The strong smoke of the unfiltered Chesterfield King sent shock waves through his body from the lungs out. The first drag made him dizzy, the second made him cough, and the third got him out of bed. What the hell was going on? Landis never called in the middle of the night like this. It must be something really special for him to shell out 200 smackers. For a tightwad like Woodley, that bordered on unbelievable. Must be some porn, Chet thought, something kinky or weird. Chet knew the cameras were ready and the set was lit over at Landis's house. He knew that it would be a piece of cake for him to roll film. Figuring he could probably sleep the remaining few hours of the night over there, he packed his overnight bag. Outside, the wind picked up. The smell of rain freshened the air. There was no traffic to speak of as Chet guided his Ford down Sunset Boulevard toward Beechwood Canyon. 14. Thora Beaumont panicked when she found the front door open and her father gone. She called Dr. Segwick at home, her fingers clumsy and numb on the heavy rotary dialer. It took several tries before she successfully made the connection. He suggested she call the police. She contacted the night desk sergeant on duty at the North Hollywood police station, who transferred her over to Lieutenant Garth Prees in the Department of Missing Persons. After listening to her story, Prees explained that an adult couldn't be declared legally missing until he'd been gone for 48 hours. Lieutenant Prees promised to keep an unofficial eye out for her father, should anyone report a man wandering around. But there was really nothing he could do for the time being. She pleaded, insisting that her father was ill and feverish and quite likely to be disoriented. Prees took down a detailed description. Thora found her father's address book and called everyone she thought might be helpful, each conversation more rushed and desperate than the last. In return, she received a carload of advice. Everyone did agree on one thing: Thora should not, under any circumstances, go out looking for Albert alone. She put the address book in her pocket. What was everybody so damned afraid of? She drove to Devela's apartment. She knocked on the door and, after a few minutes of silence, pounded on it. "There's no one home, dearie," a rough female voice croaked behind her. The sound made her jump. "You scared me," Thora said, clutching her chest. "Sorry, my voice does that sometimes," the old lady barked hoarsely. Her gin-soaked, cigarette-rough vocal cords put out a strange combination of sounds that seemed to be indigenous to 60-year-old Hollywood matrons. It was a smoky, sensual sound that only time and tobacco could create. Her hair in curlers and her housecoat buttoned high, she looked like a dried apple doll that Thora had made in summer camp once many years ago. "I'm looking for Miss Devela. Have you seen her?" "She hasn't been home since yesterday," the voice answered. "I'm Myrna. I live across the hall." She lit a cigarette and blew smoke at the ceiling. "Are you a friend of Devela's?" "Yes." "Well, actually, my father is," Thora answered. "I'm looking for him." Myrna squinted at Thora's face, saw the lines of consternation there, and smiled. "What's the problem, sweetie?" Thora's forehead wrinkled and her eyes cast down. The panic of the night's searching had now turned to resigned worry and sadness. "It's nothing," she said. "You've been crying." "What's wrong, hon?" Thora could feel the tears welling up again. Her voice got that little hitch in it that meant she was going to cry any second. My father is missing, and I thought—" Myrna opened the door to her apartment wider, and Thora could see the blue glow of a black-and-white TV screen showing an old movie and a room crowded with bric-a-brac and memorabilia. The smell of coffee drifted out. "How about a cup of Java?" Myrna asked. Their eyes met. Thora could do little to disguise the pain she was going through, and Myrna couldn't help but feel concerned. "I don't know," Thora mumbled. "Oh, sure you do. Everybody likes a nice cup of hot coffee to cheer them up. You look like you've been out all night." "I've got to find Miss Devela," Thora begged, her face distorted with the onset of tears. Myrna handed Thora a tissue and led her into the tiny apartment. She sat her down gently at the kitchen table as though she was leading a child, and busied herself pouring a cup of coffee and buttering an English muffin. The food and drink seemed to revive her slightly. "I'm sorry, I should go. I shouldn't bother you," Thora said with the halting speech of someone fighting to control their emotions. "Nonsense. You just sip that coffee and tell Myrna what's troubling you." Thora did as she was told. The coffee, a trifle too hot, burned her mouth and throat and brought the color of life back into her cheeks. Thora, unpracticed at holding things in, began to explain. It felt good to tell it, as if the words themselves were bearing weight, and once removed let her breathe again. "My father was very sick. He had a fever, and he wasn't himself." Myrna nodded. "Fevers can do that, hon. Go on." "Anyway, I had to go to class. I go to college at UCLA, and I left him alone for just a few hours. Right when I was leaving, Miss Devela showed up, said she wanted to visit my dad, so I let her in. I thought it would be a good idea, you see." They dated one time. Myrna poured more coffee. I see, she said. So anyway, I left her alone in the house, told her to go on up and stay with him, and when I came back, he was gone. Both of them. Yeah, both. I thought that maybe they were together, you know. Maybe he felt better, and they decided to go out somewhere. But he's been gone all night. Myrna pointed to the muffin. Eat some. Thora put the dry biscuit in her mouth and began to chew. Myrna watched with sad, knowing eyes. Well, she said, it sounds to me like they probably went out and had a good old time, and he just forgot to call, that's all. I don't think so. He was very sick. It doesn't make sense. There was a knock on the back door of Myrna's apartment. She had a small door that led from the kitchen to the parking court in the back. Myrna crossed the room and opened the door. Another old lady was standing there. Catherine, do come in. We've got company. Catherine entered the room, looking very much like Myrna, without the curlers. Her housecoat was pastel blue and made of the same quilted material. Company. Well, isn't that... She saw the tears on Thora's face and stopped. What's the matter, child? Did old Myrna scare you? I most certainly did not, Myrna rasped. She came here looking for you-know-who. Devila. That witch? Well, it doesn't surprise me one bit. She's made more than one person cry. Myrna was trying to signal for Catherine to shut up, but the other old woman kept right on talking. What do you mean? Asked Thora. What I mean is that Hussy has been nothing but trouble since she moved in here. I don't think she wants to hear that, Myrna protested. Please. Thora looked at Catherine. Please tell me. You might as well sit down and pour yourself a cup. Myrna sighed. By the way, this is Thora. She's looking for her father, who didn't come home last night after seeing our lovely neighbor. Thora, this is Catherine Schlitz. Catherine lives upstairs. Oh, Catherine said. I didn't mean to... What were you going to tell me about Devila? Thora demanded. Well, it's just that she isn't very honest, that's all. Thora looked from Catherine to Myrna, searching for answers, her brow furrowed. Go ahead, tell her. You've already tipped over the apple cart, Myrna said with resignation. Well, I had an Oscar statuette, Catherine said proudly, a real one. It was for Best Actress in the year 1931, won by Marie Dressler. She got it for a movie called Min and Bill. Beat out Marlene Dietrich, who was red hot that year. Marlene was up for Morocco or some such trash. Thora nodded, not really understanding what all this had to do with Devila and her father. Yes? Marie Dressler was a dear old lady who lived in this very building, up in 2B. She was already ill when she won the Oscar, and she passed away a few years later. They cleaned out her apartment, and her daughter gave me the statuette because she said that Marie wanted me to have it. I was close to Marie, I guess you could say. Anyway, it was great honor to have the Oscar, and I kept it on my mantel for years, until she stole it. She pointed across the hall to Devila's apartment. She stole it? Thora said. Myrna smiled. Well, we're not positive, hun. I am, Catherine said firmly. I'm sure she took it. She took it while I was making brownies one day. She just came right in and took it. Myrna put her hand on Thora's knee and patted it affectionately. I thought I saw it once when she left her door open. I can't be sure, of course, but I thought I saw it in her room. Who else would take it? Myrna shot Catherine a glance. So far, the effect of all her furtive looks and shut-up glances had been nil. Catherine obviously had a mind of her own and didn't care a whit for anything Myrna was trying to tell her through body language. Catherine sipped her coffee noisily. She'd been coveting the thing for months, you know. I could tell she really wanted it bad. It was a real Oscar, not some kind of fake knockoff. Julia is a huge movie fan. She collects memorabilia. Julia? Thora asked. Julia Greenlee is Deviler's real name. It was on the lease. It seems that nothing about her is what it appears to be, does it? Thora nodded, interested in Catherine's monologue, yet still polite and timid. She had never considered Deviler being anything but honest and sincere. After all, the woman was a star, wasn't she? Myrna stepped into the conversation, eager to keep it balanced and unbiased. Julia wouldn't ever let us into her apartment. She was very secretive, very private. The time I thought I saw the statuette was when she left the door ajar for a minute. Of course, neither one of us has ever set foot in there to know for certain. The point is, and I don't want to worry you, but neither one of us likes that woman. She's dishonest. Catherine interrupted. The two ladies seemed to edit each other constantly as they spoke, one hardly waiting for the other to breathe before she jumped in to make a point or disagree. And then there's all the men. Myrna jerked her hand up and wagged a finger at Catherine. I don't think Thora wants to hear about that. Remember, her father was dating... Yes, Thora said sharply. Yes, I do want to know. Catherine cleared her throat and sipped again at the coffee cup. Thora noticed that it was decorated with a design that said, Elvis Presley is the king. She held her little finger straight out as she drank. I always thought she was a little tramp. What with that costume she wears on television and those dreadful movies she shows. She has a regular harem of boyfriends, mostly deadbeats with beards and dungarees. Usually she doesn't get home until after 2 in the morning, probably drunk. Men call on her at all hours. Sometimes she lets them stay all night. Myrna smiled. Well, you can see that she has no fans here, dearie. Between that and the missing statuette, we just don't trust her. The brazen hussy took it, Catherine snorted. I should have called the police. Why didn't you? Thora wanted to know. Oh no, we never call the police, Catherine said. Why not? The two old ladies looked at each other, a flash of guilt passed between them. Myrna sighed. Sometimes we make our own spirits. Thora looked confused. Spirits? Spring tonic, Myrna said. My father's recipe. Albert Beaumont raced through the scrub brush on all fours, scrambling up and down the dark canyons. It didn't take him long to become completely lost. The lights of LA were gone now, just a ruddy glow over the horizon from where he came. Lizards skittered through the dried shrubbery, making frantic dashes across his path. It seemed strange that just a few hundred yards from his home, from the orderly housing tract he lived in, was the wild. Being a city built in a desert, the limits of LA were constantly being pushed farther out into the untamed brush that surrounded it. Mountain lions and other wild animals were finding rows of suburban ranch homes where just last year they'd hunted for food. Out here, over a few canyon walls, just a stone's throw from the freeway, was another world. The animals, crowded out by man's invasion, competed for food and territory in the shrinking, unspoiled land. Albert was aware of these things as he escaped deeper and deeper into the hillsides. His brain writhed inside his skull, as afraid and panicked as those lizards. He kept moving, placing one foot in front of the other, trying not to think about the serpent. He had no way of knowing when it would return, and the thought terrified him. At least, if it happened now, he would be far away from Thora. Albert Beaumont believed in God, although he had never prayed to him. All his adult life, since he'd made the big rationalization that there was no good or evil, he'd wasted his time praying to the devil. Now, in his hour of need, he found his allegiance shifting. The blackness was closing in on him, staining his life beyond redemption. It's been said that many an atheist prayed when their plane went down. He chuckled to himself softly, aware now of the truth of that statement. What a fool I've been, he thought. What a steaming pile of shit I've been to be so naive. Greed and lust for power must have corrupted my heart easier and deeper than I knew. I fucked my own self, and now I pay. I only hope that Thora doesn't have to pay also. The sins of the father, will they also be those of the daughter? Albert knew it was only a matter of time before the serpent returned, and only a short time beyond that before Thora became affected. This he knew with terrible certainty. He also knew the only way out for him. He was desperate now, not afraid. The difference was that he knew, when the moment came for him to consummate the decision he'd made, that he would not hesitate. He had to do what he had to do without thinking, because thinking would only cause him to balk. That would be dangerous. In that moment of uncertainty, the serpent might return, take over his body, and force him back home to Thora. How much longer did he have? I've got to save my daughter, he thought. Nothing else matters. He kept that idea in the front of his mind, flashing like a neon sign, guiding him. The night passed like a freight train. Time clicked off like the tapping of the rails. Eventually, a few hours before dawn, the wind began to pick up. It blew hard now, out of the west. It felt warm and ominous, bringing the scent of the ocean to the alien desert landscape, swirling through the canyons. Dry bushes rattled in its wake. Albert knew that soon it would begin to rain. Rain was rare in LA, and he couldn't remember the last time it had fallen. Tonight the smell of it hung in the wind and raced across the dry soil with the promise of a deluge. The animals of the desert, the lizards and rodents, had noticed it long ago. Albert staggered up one hill and down the next, disoriented and aimless, with only one thought in mind. Get away, get as far away as possible. He felt himself growing weak from the night-long journey, but he dared not rest. As long as there was an ounce of strength in his legs, a sigh of air in his lungs, he would push on. "Give me a sign," he asked the night. A sign. Albert huffed badly as he topped yet another canyon wall. It seemed like the 100th one he'd scaled tonight. His legs felt rubbery. He stood looking down as his lungs fought for oxygen. Below him spread a wide valley, part scrub, part unattended orchard. The waves of endless canyons had ended, giving way to this panorama of flatland. He squinted in the half-light and saw that a line of high-tension power lines bisected the valley neatly down the center. They marched like silent, unmoving alien robots through the heart of the flatland and up into the next set of hills. Through the center of the valley, at the lowest point, ran a dry creek bed. Its lower half was rimmed with concrete, forming a conduit for the infrequent runoff. Flood control, thought Albert. It probably runs south into the Los Angeles River. The Los Angeles River seemed a grossly misleading bit of nomenclature. It was more like a big drainage ditch. The merest trickle of water ran through its cement course, not much more than a labyrinth of sewers and underground water pipe. The once proud river had been, sadly, tamed by man. Its passage set, it now led a docile, schizophrenic life, following its predestined route meekly to flow like a piss stream of warm yellow water searching for the sea. Until the rains came. Then it became a monster. The power lines followed its meandering route through this particular valley, as yet unmarred by the urban sprawl. Albert blinked, rubbed his eyes, and began shambling down the slope toward the creek bed. The wind whipped up dust devils, and the abrasive sand assaulted his face. The sun made orange the eastern hillside. The first raindrops began to fall.